So it's evening here when I'm doing this video log, and I try to do the my videos first thing in the morning when my mind is sharp and my eyes are not tired. But I don't think this one can wait until tomorrow morning. um, the Taipei Times, written by Tikhon Zayedko. Now I don't know who this guy is, but I believe it's necessary to read what he has to say. The title is Putin's Falling Popularity Spells Bad News for Russia's Neighbors. So, as he writes, just 7 months ago, Russian President Vladimir Putin won re-election for the fourth time with 77% of the vote. However, according to a poll conducted by the Russian Public Opinion Research Center, if a presidential election were held now, Putin would probably receive only 47% of the vote, forcing him into a second round runoff. This is a dangerous state of affairs for Russia and the world. Of course, poll data in Russia does not necessarily reflect a real balance of power, yet such a steep decline is a remarkable development, not least because Russians who remember well the harsh punishments dissidents faced during Soviet times often prefer to speak positively of their leaders when asked. Putin first secured the presidency in 2000 on the promise to raise living standards and restore Russia's status as a leading global power. Fortunately for him, oil prices began to skyrocket. Meanwhile, he set to work reviving the Soviet Union under a different name, but similarly based on opposition to U.S. global leadership and Western-style democratization. From the start, Putin used media censorship to secure his authority, ensuring that any success, including rising oil prices, was hailed as his personal achievement. As Russian Duma Chairman Vyacheslav Volodin said in 2014, "There is Putin, there is Russia. There is no Putin, there is no Russia." Of course, failures were never Putin's fault. So in 2007, when economic growth was slowing and social inequality rising, Putin delivered a speech at the Munich Security Conference condemning the US for its domination of global affairs and implying that the expansion of NATO into the Baltics was directed against Russia. Suddenly, all of Russia's struggles could be blamed on a new Cold War supposedly declared by the West. In 2008, Kosovo's declaration of independence and Russia's war with Georgia further reinforced Putin's besieged fortress narrative. Nevertheless, by 2013, Putin's approval ratings dropped to record lows, even lower than today's levels. So Putin pulled out the big guns. First, metaphorically, then literally. In 2014, after Russian athletes performed impressively at the Sochi Winter Olympics with the help of a vast state-sponsored doping system, Russia invaded Ukraine and annexed Crimea. I had mentioned this before, how he used the Sochi Winter Olympic Games to get his neighbor's guard down and take Crimea. State media proclaimed that Putin was fulfilling his promise of restoring Russia's former greatness. Where have we heard this before? I will continue. Putin's approval rating then soared to 85%. Russian stores were filled with t-shirts emblazoned with his face alongside phrases like "Thanks for the Crimea" and "the politest of people." For the overwhelming majority of Russians, Putin's authority was indisputable. If their president supported a policy or decision, Russians willingly accepted it, however unpopular it may have been initially. Putin had followed the advice attributed to Vyacheslav Konstantinovich von Pleve, who served as a director of police and later minister of the interior under Tsar Nicholas II. And I quote, "To avert a revolution, we need a small, victorious war." However, while Putin's small, victorious war boosted his standing and silenced dissent, the long-term consequences have been severe, owing to the stringent Western sanctions imposed in response to the annexation of Crimea. As a result of those sanctions, the ruble's value have fallen by half against the US dollar. Inflation is up, and Russian household purchasing power and living standards have fallen. At the end of last summer, the cash-strapped Russian government was forced to raise the retirement age, a move opposed by 90% of the population. Not even an emergency TV appeal by Putin himself could secure broader public support. Moreover, despite Putin's backing, the ruling United Russia Party has suffered rare electoral setbacks in the Russia's Far East. Representatives of the nationalist, anti-Western, liberal Democratic Party trounced the United Russia candidates in second-round runoffs in the gubernatorial elections in the Khabarovsk and Vladimir Oblasts. In a gubernatorial election in Primorsky Krai, a Communist Party candidate appeared to win, thanks partly to protest votes against United Russia, Putin's party. Before the election was ruled invalid and the United Russia candidate was declared the winner, the uproar was so potent that for the first time in Russia's post-Soviet history, the election results were annulled. Some experts claim that the United Russia electoral defeats reflect a kind of power fatigue, but the fact remains that as average Russians' well-being has declined and Putin cronies' wealth has continued to swell, proclamations of Russian greatness have begun to ring hollow. Citizens now wonder how strong Russia's position really is. Bucking under sanctions and isolated by the West, the country has begun to look less like the great power than a geopolitical has-been. It has begun to look less like a great power and more like a geopolitical has-been. I will continue. Official propaganda still blames the West for the country's plight, but Russians are not convinced, and they are not nearly as impressed by Russia's engagement in faraway Syria. Whatever boost it might provide the country's role in world affairs, as they were by the annexing of neighboring Crimea. Yeah, see. So, last paragraph. However, if Putin's 18 years in power has taught us anything, it is that his declining approval ratings are not good news for anyone. Russians might be tired, but Putin is not. And if he feels that his authority is waning, he could soon decide that it is time for another victory at somebody else's expense. Now, Which brings me to my thought. All right. Who can Vladimir Putin blame for anything, any negativity in Syria? All right, let me help you out. Let me give you a clue. Who does the whole world blame for all the world's ails? Do you know? Since 67 AD, who is it that blamed no. Who is it that the world blamed for everything? If you don't know the answer by now, you're in trouble. The world always blames the Jews. Always. And who is next door to Syria? The Jews. If you think that a grievous amount of anti Semitism does not exist in Russia, you would be sadly mistaken. It is around the world, especially in Russia and in Europe. So, if Russia decided to put Israel in its place, Israel, you must obey international law and hand over the Golan Heights, or else we're going to take it from you. Yeah, that kind of describes this last paragraph in this particular article, where he says, however, if Putin's 18 years in power has taught us anything, it is that his declining approval rating are not good news for anyone. Russians might be tired, but Putin is not. And if he feels that his authority is waning, he could soon decide that it is time for another victory at somebody else's expense. You know, they tried that before in 67. You know that Russia thinks they have unfinished business with Israel because of 1967 and 1973, the Yom Kippur War. They also believe they have unfinished business with the Syrian downing of an Aleutian Russian spy plane. Well, can't blame it on Syria. Blame it on Israel. Blame it on the Jews. That's what everybody else does. So this fellow, Tikhon Ziadko, is warning the world. The world is in trouble, he's saying. It is on the Taipei Times of all publications. I don't even know how I found it. I really don't. This is incredible. Anyway, I wanted to share this with you. And as I've mentioned many times before, I believe that the Gog Magog War triggers the coming of the Messiah, the coming of Israel's Messiah, the coming of Yehoshua, Israel's Messiah, And he is coming to fight against these Jesus supporters. That's right. There is a difference.